Today, we're diving into a really interesting and kind of backward idea: how communities that are miles away from a big project can actually have the power to shut it down, even when the people living right next door are totally on board.
I mean, think about it. It happens way more than you'd think. A company comes in, they do everything by the book. They get their permits, they win over the locals, they invest in the community. And yet, the whole thing just grinds to a halt. How is that even possible? Well, the answer is that a project's real community isn't always who you think it is.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to unpack this idea of a social license to operate. Then, we'll look at how companies map out their true impact. We'll break down these three crucial community zones and then put it all to the test with a real-world case study. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the one big takeaway you'll want to remember.
Okay, to get started, we've got to wrap our heads around an idea that's honestly more powerful than any legal piece of paper: the social license.
A social license isn't something you can, frame and hang on the wall. It's this ongoing, unwritten permission from everyone around you, the community, the public, to do business. If you don't have it, even the most legally sound project is basically built on quicksand. It's all about acceptance.
So how does a company even start to earn that acceptance? Well, the very first step is figuring out who your community really is. And that means mapping out what's called their area of influence, or AOI.
The area of influence, the AOI, isn't just the land the company bought. It's the entire region that feels the ripple effects of the project, from the air quality and the water sources to the very social fabric of people's lives. And defining this area is a huge job. I mean, companies have to look at everything: the impact on ecosystems, on biodiversity, on water. And then there's the human side. Could people be displaced? What are the social dynamics at play? How will this affect local jobs in the economy? Getting this map right is absolutely crucial. Now, once that map is drawn, we start to see something really fascinating. Not all communities have the same power to stir up conflict. This model actually breaks them down into three totally distinct zones.
So first up is Zone 1. These are the communities located right inside that area of influence. To build good relationships and earn that social license, companies often invest heavily here. Building schools, hospitals, providing clean water. In our model, we're going to give them a value of 1. But what about the people living just across that invisible line? Well, that brings us to Zone 2. These are the communities right near the AOI, but not technically in it. So they get to watch the new school go up next door, but they don't get any of those benefits. We assign these communities a value of 2. You have to remember, before the companies showed up, these neighboring towns were probably pretty similar. But now, one is getting all this investment while the other gets left behind. This creates what the source material calls a natural jealousy, a really powerful resentment that can easily become a major source of conflict. All right, get ready for this, because this is where things get really counterintuitive. You would think the farther away you are from a project, the less you care, right? Well, this model says the exact opposite is true. The potential for conflict actually gets higher the farther away you go. How on earth does that work? Well, that brings us to Zone 3. These communities are far away. They aren't affected by the mine itself, but by all the logistics: the trucks rumbling through their towns, the busy ports, the new railways. Their involvement is so powerful because they can take a small local dispute and blow it up into a regional or even a national issue. They know how to get media attention, how to get politicians involved, and that makes the problem way more complex. That's why they get the highest value, 3. Okay, so that's the theory. Now let's see how this whole thing actually plays out in a real-world scenario with the Highlands Lagoon project. So here's the setup. A mining company wants to dig in the highlands, but the minerals are underneath a small lagoon. So they come up with a plan. They'll drain the lagoon to get the minerals, but in its place, they'll build a brand new modern reservoir to give local farmers a steady water supply. They work with the immediate community, our Zone 1, and they get them on board. Sounds good, right? But of course, it's not that simple. The communities nearby, in Zone 2, they start to protest. They have serious environmental concerns about draining a natural lagoon. Pretty soon, their cause gets picked up by other communities all across the territory, our Zone 3. And what started as a simple local agreement has turned into a massive, widespread protest. Okay, so let's apply our model here. The Zone 1 community, the ones inside the AOI, they're in favor, so that's a positive 1. But the Zone 2 community is opposed, and since they're a bit further out, that's a -2. And then the real heavy hitter, the broader territory, our Zone 3, is also opposed. That gives them the most weight with a score of -3. So, what's the final verdict on the social health of this project? We can get a really clear idea by just averaging these values. What do you think the result is going to be? The final score is -1.3. So, what does that number even tell us? It signals a predominantly negative sentiment, and this shows the project's real problem perfectly. Even though they got the locals on their side, the combined weight of the opposition from farther and farther away has completely torpedoed their social license to operate. This project is in very, very deep trouble. And that brings us to the single most important lesson from this whole model. So here's the bottom line. A company's world does not stop at its fence line. The biggest risks to a project often don't come from the people right next door, but from those communities down the road that got overlooked. A real social risk analysis has to look at the entire ripple effect. You know, a model like this gives us a really powerful way to measure risk, but it also kind of leaves us with a bigger question. A number can tell you if a project might fail, but can a formula ever really capture the human side of these complex, emotional, and deeply personal conflicts? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for watching.